Welcome to UT Health San Antonio Wellbeing Wisdom Podcast, a dose of learning for healthier, happier lives, brought to you by the Office of Human Resources. When we talk about work-life harmony, what we're really talking about is living in sync with our values and striking a balance between our work life and our home life. This may not be the kind of balance we're accustomed to thinking about with two equally weighted scales, but rather something more like the game of Jenga, building a meaningful life that has work integrated with the rest of our lives. This is especially true for those of us working from home, either remotely or hybrid, where the lines between our work and our home life are blurred. I'm your host, Laura Gottlieb, and our topic today is work-life harmony. We are joined by our very special guest. Welcome, UT Health Vice President for Research and Executive Director of Be Well Texas, Dr. Jennifer Potter. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Potter.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
Dr. Potter, please tell our listeners a little bit about your background and your interest in work-life harmony.
Well, I appreciate the question. It's funny to be asked about work-life harmony, and that probably explains why I'm interested in it. But I have been at UT Health San Antonio since the fall of 2008 when I moved here from Boston. And I'm a professor in the Department of Psychiatry. And most of my work has been in research and research administration. The focus of my work is substance use and substance use disorders. And my background and training are clinical psychology. So it might be intuitive to think about interest in work-life harmony from the perspective of a clinical psychologist who works in stress management and adaptive coping strategies and all of that. But it's probably more the personal that drives a particular interest in this. I used to joke in graduate school during a time when I had both of my children, which pivoted my life and how I think and view the world as my descent into mediocrity. What I meant by that at the time was twofold. It was a joking, slightly mom guilt kind of way of talking about the fact that self-acceptance is really important when I could no longer do all of the demands in my life. And I needed to find some sense of self-acceptance in that and how I was navigating these new obligations and commitments while also maintaining my own professional identity to do the work that I had spent so much time studying for and really wanted to do because I wanted to make a difference in the world. So that is a journey that began probably much earlier than that, but that's the moment in my life when I realized something's got to give, as they say.
Yeah, I appreciate your personal connection with that. And it's so interesting. People often say you can have it all, but maybe not all at once. So what is work-life harmony? That's a little bit different expression than we often hear work-life balance. So how do you define it? How is it different from work-life balance?
Sure. What's interesting is maybe start with what work-life balance means. At its most simplest, as you said, and I appreciated that in the opening, we kind of think of balance as a scale, and it's a one-dimensional this or that type of way of thinking. When I think about work-life harmony, I enjoy the word and as opposed to or, where it's not a dichotomous choice between you're either at work or you're at home. Let's get that 50-50 and everything will work out. Harmony is about two-way wins or three-way wins, where your life is harmonized and it's work and life, whatever life means to you. Because again, sometimes life is work. So it's a way of challenging ourselves, not so much to be seeking this abstract goal in the future, but finding a way to live in the now and live a life aligned with what matters to you, what's important to you and your family, and how to do that for the long haul, not just in the day-to-day.
What happens when sort of there's a clash of values? You value your work, you value your home life. What are some signs or symptoms that our work life might be out of sync? For example, what might show up in our relationships, or what are some signals that we need to pay attention to, maybe the values coming into clashing with one another?
Sure. I appreciate, Laura, your use of the word value. I like to think, as part of my journey, that I live a value-driven life. And values are a really important piece of deciding when you are in sync or when you're out of sync. So, and it's interesting, I won't connect this too much to science, but there is a robust science that tells us that values matter to people. And when you can identify your values, and live a life concordant or aligned with your values, there is, generally speaking, more satisfaction with life. It's a pleasant life. It's a life where you're living a valued direction. It doesn't mean it's always easy. It doesn't mean you're always happy. But when on balance you evaluate your life, you can say, yes, I'm living a life in accordance with my values. And it's often the reason why people, while they might not say they're happy all the time, they can say they're content. It's the great example for me is parenting. There's a study from several years ago now that talked about parenting as something that people would say they're not always happy, but they wouldn't change a thing. That's an example of a value-driven life. Parenting is hard work. It's not always about happiness. There's a higher order value in place there about being a part of raising a child. It's about the difficult things. And my husband's in the military, or used to be in the military, and he talks about an expression that I'd never heard before, but I use a lot now: is the juice worth the squeeze? I really enjoy that, because I thought, what a simple way to say, gosh, this is hard. The other one he has is embrace the suck, which I like a little bit. But I think the idea is, why? Why would you do this? Why would you continue to do something in spite of the fact that it's hard and it can be emotional? That's a signal that there's something valued to you about it. And I say all that, and apologies for the long answer, because I think that's the first part of understanding when life might be out of sync. There is value in understanding what your values are. I care, for example, and forgive the personal examples, it's just a way to anchor the conversation. I value my children. I have adult children now, but I still know that part of why I work so hard is for not only my satisfaction, but also the financial security that I can help my children and continue to do that. It means a lot to me. And I will make choices because I love my children and because I want to be there for them and make sure they have the opportunities and a little bit of a safety net. I work partly because of that, not just for myself. And quite honestly, not just because I care about our mission. And I care about our mission. That's another value of mine. Working at UT Health San Antonio gives me the opportunity to realize work that I would never have had were I not in this type of academic environment. And that is equally a value. So a life out of sync sometimes is when those values are clashing. I want to do my job, and I want to be a good parent, or I want to be a good partner, or I want to be a contributor to my church, or whatever it is that motivates and makes life outside of work important to you. When they clash, that can cause stress, right? And that's the piece where it's important to think about it. I mean, so when somebody's working 50 hours a week, when technically they're a 40-hour work week, for example, that places stress. And even if you're doing that because you enjoy it and you love it, you can find yourself in a situation where you might be coming home later than expected, or a partner or a loved one, or whatever the obligation is, because not everyone lives in a nuclear family type of environment. There may be stress because something else has to give as a result of that. And it manifests itself in feelings. And so when you say, what are the signs that our work life is out of sync? I think it's conflict, stress, And stress is subtle, right? So it can be irritability, crankiness, a general discontent. It might be sadness, or it might be conflict with other people, not just people you are close to, but even how you engage at the coffee shop that you go to for coffee when it takes 30 seconds extra. Those are examples. Work-life harmony can also be signaled at work. If you are struggling in the office, you're tired, your attention is drifting, you don't get the same pleasure out of these activities that you normally would, or you're not taking your lunch break, and all of these little signals that something is changing, I think are important to pay attention to. Then you can start to think about what to do next.
You've broadened our thinking in a multitude of ways. And one thing I heard you say is, let's think beyond happiness, but what makes a meaningful life. And a meaningful life sometimes is a hard life and it has challenges, and yet it's worth it. And then I heard you say, thinking beyond just sharing time with loved ones, but being a good parent being a good parent involves being a good provider and providing security and safety for our family members. And part of that is engaging in work so we can do that for our families. So I love how you've sort of opened our thinking about this in a multitude of ways. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the transition between work and home. Oftentimes, and especially, we've got so many people working hybrid and remotely now, that these transitions that were traditional transitions, like getting in my car and driving home from work or what have you, are no longer present. And so can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that, the importance of that, and also any practical tips on how to increase work-life harmony, how to make these things mesh and meld together and integrate in a way that does provide that meaningful life?
Sure. What a great question. And I love keeping things practical. Really briefly, I will not go on, but really briefly before that, you made such an important point at the beginning of what you said. And I find this is particularly the case for people who are new to work. In other words, this is their first job or they're early in their career. Sometimes we think about the immediate and assess work-life harmony. Another important value is where you want to go in a career. And so, and at UT Health, we think of people, regardless of where they are in their particular career or field, as how do you build a profession, a career? You have to stretch sometimes between short-term benefits and long-term, because a valued direction is just that. It's a direction. It's where you want to go. So I really do encourage people, when they're assessing their work-life harmony, not just to think about the now, but to think about, is what you're doing now worth it? Because it's also getting you somewhere that actually aligns with another value that you might have on the home front. So just I hope that was okay that I segued there. Transitions are so important. I just can't emphasize enough and I think very concretely, so I'll try to be very concrete here. Even just that idea, as you described, of going from your home environment to your work environment, or vice versa, particularly when your home environment is actually also your work environment, is complicated. So an example of that would be driving home. You've had a challenging day at the office, and when you get home, there are certain expectations. There's a transition that you have to have, whether that's your fur baby or other people, or someone who called you during the day that you're going to have to call back. Just different examples, or just the housekeeping that you have to do, or the fact that you didn't go to the grocery store and you're going to have to figure out how to get food on the table. And maybe it's the end of the pay period and it's a little financially tight, or whatever it is. It's what you do between the work and the life that matters. A really simple example, because you were asking for tips, is I used to listen to the news a lot on my drive home, because I work on campus. And what I found was not only was I tired from the day, I was also cranky from the news.
Mhm.
And I would walk into my home, and my spouse would be there, and I would completely have a verbal assault on his ears of all the things about the news that I did not like. Uh, uh, and what I realized is that probably that wasn't actually about the news. I didn't like the news, but a lot of it was about I needed a pop off valve. And I was using my husband unfairly as the pop off valve for just a lot of energy that I had built up over the course of the day. Now, my day was fine. I liked it, but I got home, I was energized in this content. And what I noticed was if I turned off the radio in my car and got home, it made not only his life better, which is extremely important because I love my husband, it actually made me feel better. And I used that time to just sort of decompress. That may or may not work for everyone, but that's a really clear example. It's also why I think that, and human resources did not pay me to say this, why I think it's so important to define a workspace when you are working from home, because it allows these lives to respect the slight separation. If your computer is on, and some people may not be able to adapt, I understand that. It may be that the table in the kitchen is the office. But how do we design it such that you don't have emails popping up all evening, distracting you as you're trying to spend other time doing something else? That can lead to one of those out of sync signals where you're feeling like you're constantly pinged. There's this noise in the background for all of that. There's a reason we want people to use PTO. There's a reason there's a reason we have benefits. And there's a reason why scientists will tell you there is a benefit to turning off your phone. Another really quick example, I wear an Apple Watch. And I took that off on my PTO, and I found it immensely therapeutic. I have a job where I can't avoid my email. I make a choice to read email on PTO, but I didn't have it buzzing in my phone, and I was on my hand, and I was so much more present and was able to manage and control. Those are little adaptation tips that we have. I also think it's important for supervisors to recognize this and encourage those types of things. So if you send emails to an employee late at night, tell the employee it is not, if it is not, your expectation that they read it. That's so you can spend time late in the evening taking care of something, not that the expectation is that the employee will do that, because that will also create stress in the employee. I've kind of gone off on a tangent there, but I hope that helps with some tactics and tips.
It helps a lot, this idea of setting and managing expectations. So you have clarity on what your manager expects and your colleagues expect of you, and what you expect of yourself, and negotiating that with each other. I think that's brilliant. The other thing that I love that you said is define your workspace. I think that this is super important. I've heard from colleagues who had a workstation in their bedroom talk about having some sleep issues and developing into sleep disorder because their work was in their sleep space. And so I think defining that space and finding a space where you can transition to other aspects of your life is going to be critical for people. So I appreciate your advice on that.
So I think, I just want to mention one thing about suggestions, because even as I make suggestions, they come within my context. And so it is very much the case, I suspect, that some people that are working from home, the best workspace is the bedroom. And I'm not saying this to correct you. What I want to do is give a tip on how you might do that if your workspace is in your bedroom. It's really important to use your technology knowledge or get the help from IT to understand how to do what's going to make that difficult. It is not so much that the computer's there, it is the dings, the light. Light disrupts sleep. So the light, the dings, all those things that seem like they're just, you can tune them out, even if you're very good at tuning them out. It's really useful that computer go off. Lights, printers, any blue light, any light like that. I might suggest as a tip, if you are working from a bedroom or a family space and you're not working on a laptop that you can just close, is get a towel or get something And literally at the end of your day, just like you might turn off your computer at the office or log out, you cover it. And that's my tip, but it allows people to work with wherever their circumstances are. Just cover it with a towel or do whatever it is to go. That's the end of my workday. This is there. And for those of us who can separate, I salute you. But if you can't and you do need a signal, that token behavior, that ritualization of turning off the light, if you will, by putting something over it, covering it, whatever it is really helpful to get that sleep cycle on track.
That's awesome. I am thinking about the last time I was in an amusement park, and I noticed the park employees started covering up parts of the park equipment and rides and things like that. And we all looked at each other like, I guess it's time to go. Because it was a great social cue and signal that the day was coming to a close. And so having those signals that the workday is at a close or coming to a close, I think is super helpful for people. And especially if you don't have other options and your workstation is positioned in a place that you may retire at the end of the day. So some people are really struggling with this. And, in the introduction, I mentioned your role as Vice President of Research, and you're also Executive Director of Be Well Texas. What are your thoughts on people who really struggle with this, where it becomes, stressful, anxiety developing, and potentially even burnout? What are some good resources when someone is really having difficulty separating work and home life?
Sure. Again, it's a great point. When we were talking about when signals of work life are out of sync, you'll notice I mentioned sort of little glitches, little flickers of irritation or stress or something like that. There is a fundamental difference. Stress is normal in our lives. And some stress unexpectedly is actually a good thing. But too much stress is not a good thing. And that leads to things and phrases like burnout and all of those things. So there are warning signs. The more serious concerns we have, as you mentioned, are anxiety, depression. There are some really simple self-assessments that you can do. Feeling more anxious than not nearly every day is a warning sign. Feeling down or depressed or a loss of pleasure in things that you normally enjoy most of the day, nearly every day, is a concern. And I'm just going to mention a lot of what we do at Be Well Texas is manage those types of issues through telehealth and in person, but we also talk to people about substance use, and that's alcohol or other drugs. Using substances is also a flag that something might be going on. Now, I don't mean that as having a beverage, an adult beverage, a glass of alcohol or wine. It's people's choice what they choose to do in their private lives to a large extent, depending on the type of work that they do. But when in psychology, we talk about a functional relationship between a behavior and a desired outcome. And so I'll use alcohol because that's something I work with a lot. Using a drink or more than one drink or 4 to 5 drinks, and I'm talking about an ounce to an ounce and a half of alcohol as one drink, a unit, and using those to decompress creates these functional relationships between alcohol and stress relief that can lead to significant problems. When you are depressed or anxious, you may choose to do certain behaviors that become so entrenched that they're at the expense of other things. It could even be internet shopping. It could be gaming. It could be doing things that are the only thing you do to manage moods and feelings, or just going to bed and not taking care of yourself. All of those things are signs that have gone beyond perhaps what we talk about as stress and little signals that we want to think about some tips. Those are actually moments of opportunity that would often benefit from assistance. Your primary care provider is a great place to go for some issues here. There is also at UT other avenues and vehicles. And this conversation that you're having is one example of that, including some of the employee assistance programs. primary care is a very good way to start to have a conversation and express a concern. When things reach that level, or for anyone who might be feeling that their stress or whatever it is that they're feeling might reach the point that life might not be worth living, that they have thoughts of suicide or self-harm or injury, those are moments when it is appropriate and welcome and a good thing. It's a smart decision to seek out advice and help, because there are situations where this can contribute either to a new or underlying depression, anxiety, or other things that actually can be quite harmful. And it's important to get help. And there is no reason to feel ashamed of that. It is normal. This is expected. There are many, many people who struggle with things, and then they seek out help. And the nice thing is that when they use treatment can be effective in providing relief.
You've said so many things that just make the tension in my body relax. Stress is normal. It makes me not want to fight against it, just kind of relax that that's just part of life. And, kind of managing it is part of life. And self-compassion, I think, is evident in a lot of the advice and recommendations that you've shared, where we have some compassion for ourselves, some understanding about managing these relationships between our work and home life, and that they are integrated, and kind of making peace with that. So I really appreciate all of your insights, and also the recommendation to seek help if it's getting to a point where these things are impacting one's life and becoming debilitating in one way or another. Another resource that we often recommend for our workforce is our UT Employee Assistance Program. They provide help with personal and workplace issues for not only employees, but their families too. They offer a variety of services, everything from counseling sessions with a licensed mental health professional to legal and financial resources. They help with work-life referrals as well. Through the UTEAP, a spouse, live-in partner, eligible dependent children can all access these free, convenient, and confidential services 24/7. So we really encourage, if you're struggling with work-life harmony, seek help. It's there available to you in different forms. And we so appreciate you, Dr. Potter, sharing your well-being wisdom with us today and making lives better here at UT Health. So we want to thank you. We've gained a lot of insight in terms of living a truly values-driven life, so we can achieve that work-life harmony. So thank you for joining us. And we ask that our listeners please tune in next time. We will be talking about suicide prevention.